when you watch the recording, there's no interaction.
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
That's
and
so
tonight there will be
important.
opportunity for interaction both in the chat box, and we're also going to do a role play if people will participate. So, yeah.
That's
Okay,
good.
I'm going to let somebody else in now.
Perfect. I hope some of the people I invite, they're coming.
Well, somebody else that was in your meeting last week, I
Who is
can't
that?
remember. I can't remember his name. Is he Dutch or the solar guy, Solar Tech?
Oh, uh, Day On.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Day On, yeah. That's good. That's good. I send it to share too. Yeah. Hello, Joshua.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, Joshua.
Hi.
Welcome.
How's it going?
It's going well.
Thank you. Yes.
Are all the people registered are from Calgary or?
No, it's very interesting because it's advertised on Eventbrite. And so then it just depends on how people search for content or things like that. And it's international. There are people in the United States. There are people in Europe. There's people in North Africa.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah.
That's, yeah,
So it can be quite an international audience.
that's awesome. I like it. Oh my God, it's -2 today. I'm loving it.
Oh, yes, it's getting warmer. I was hoping that the snow would stop.
We deserve it.
It was supposed to snow here, but it's just raining. I'm in Northern California. So
You got the
we're
nice weather there.
yeah, it's been snowing a lot lately. It's been interesting. So normally it doesn't. But Southern California and Northern California has been getting a lot of snow.
Well, we're getting some more people joining us. That's always great. I am going to, I will invite people as they come on if they are willing to put their cameras on, because we always enjoy more interaction when we can see people's faces. If you're very camera shy, it's all right to stay without your camera on, but I know that everybody else really appreciates it when people come with their face. Later on, we will go into breakout rooms near the end of the webinar for you to be able to practice some of the things that we're talking about. And in your breakout room, it's very difficult to participate in the exercise that we're going to do without your camera. So just to give you a heads up about that, if you really don't want to be on camera with other people, maybe when you go in the breakout room, you could do that. And I can already see that somebody else has chosen to leave the webinar, maybe because of my announcement, inviting people to put their camera on. What I will invite you to do, though, if you want to, is there is a chat function that's available. If you're not familiar with Zoom, then if you move your cursor, usually if you're on a laptop or if you're on another device, if you're on a mobile device, if you just tap it, you should get some pop-up somewhere, maybe with a chat icon, a little speech bubble. And if you don't have it on your laptop, then if you click on the three dots that say more, which are usually on the bottom bar at the bottom, there will be an option to hit the chat button. And if you could just put in the chat button where you're joining us from, then we get an idea of where our participants are around the world. And one other question that I want to ask you about, I'm in just outside of Calgary, Alberta, and I am wondering if you can just pop in there what your favorite season of the year is. We had snow again just yesterday, and I'm waiting for the snow to leave. And I so desperately want to have sunny, warm weather like they do in other parts of the world. And I think that we've had enough snow already. So pop into the chat box what your favorite season of the year is. We are going to be talking today about resolving conflict, and I am going to be presenting to you a template that you can use in order to be able to resolve a single issue conflict. So the first thing that I really want to start out with is an understanding of what kind of conflict you can come to or use this template with. And this is a single issue conflict. So if you were having difficulty deciding with somebody how you want to do something or when you want to do something or what the outcome of it should be, then this template will work very well for you. But if you have a very complex conflict, then this might not be the way for you to go, because you might have to untangle some of those issues in a more complex conflict and then use this template with each individual issue one at a time. I'm going to put a poll up on the screen because I'm always interested in finding out from my viewers and my participants different information. I want you to know that the poll is going to be confidential, so nobody will know how you answer the poll, but I'm going to put on there a question for you to be able to answer. What is your preferred, maybe poorly choice to solve conflict when you're not doing it well? And there are several different options that you can choose from: avoidance, being defensive, generalizing, communicating you are right, not listening, blaming the other person, or something else. And you can actually choose more than one answer if you want to. I'll give you a minute just to look at that poll. Okay, I think everybody's answered the poll. That's great. I'm going to share my results with you. You'll see them, but you won't see who answered which way. It's quite interesting. Avoidance is a great way for people to poorly solve conflict because you can stay away from it. Another very common one is generalizing. Usually you generalize about the person, but sometimes you can also generalize about yourself. And this is most commonly done when people use the words always or never.
Yep.
You never wash the dishes, or you always leave a mess. Those sorts of things are not useful in trying to resolve conflict. Okay, I'm going to share my PowerPoint with you now, and we'll begin the presentation. So 5 steps to resolve your conflict. Here is the template that we're going to see throughout the evening. You can solve your conflict. So I've used the SOLVE of solve in order to make an acronym so that it's easier for people to be able to understand and remember what the different stages are. So the first one is to set the stage, then to openly talk about the background. Thirdly, look for options. Then vote for the best choice. And finally, experiment with your choice and endorse it if it's approved. Okay, firstly, let's talk about setting the stage. What does it mean to set the stage? And this is where we have to actually make an appointment with the person with whom we're in conflict. Now, I've read a wonderful book by somebody who talks about the importance of planning a meeting. And when you have a meeting planned, it's really important for everybody to know exactly what the meeting is about. And when people know what a meeting is going to be about, they are much more engaged and they have expectations for what's going to happen during that meeting. When we're in conflict with somebody, we first want to set the stage about when and where we're going to discuss what the problem or the issue is. And in this particular instance, we want to talk about 4 different things. Firstly, who will participate? And it's important that all the people who are party to the conflict are going to be involved in the discussion. Usually, if you're just having one conflict, a conflict with one other person, then it's very easy because you can set the stage by just the 2 of you agreeing on when you're going to meet together. But if there's more people that are involved in the conflict, then you want to make sure that everybody who's a part of the conflict is involved in this discussion process. Second thing, you want to decide, when will you participate? So what time will it be? And of course, going along with when is where you will participate. Where is this meeting going to take place? And those will also help set somebody's mind and prepare them with right expectations of what that meeting is going to be like. And lastly, and this is the most important one, you want to know what exactly you will be discussing. So you have to be really clear with each other what exactly is the issue. And sometimes this can be quite thorny. It can be difficult to try and discern or agree with the person that you're in conflict with what exactly it is that you'll be discussing. And sometimes people will make the issue too small, and sometimes they will make the issue too big. So it's really important that you're both understanding what exactly it is that you're going to be talking about when you get together to have this meeting. Now, when you get the meeting set up and you come and you meet together, you want to begin first by openly talking about the background to the conflict. And this involves a couple of very important points. The first one is you want to come and you want to openly talk about your responsibility in the current situation. Now, note here that you're going to talk about yourself. You're not going to talk about what the other person has done, but what you have done in order to create the current situation. So that's likely going to take a little bit of introspection. So you want to do this ahead of time. You want to think about, well, what have I done that has made the situation as poor as it is? And this is not about, oh, I've done all these wonderful things. I got everything all ready and I did my part in cleaning the house. No, you want to talk about what your responsibility is in the poor conflict resolution that you've done up until this point. And when you're doing this, you want to use only statements from your perspective. And I highly recommend people use I statements. So here's an example or an explanation of what I statements are. I statements are a helpful way to communicate responsibility for contributing negatively to a conflict. The magic of I statements is that they focus on what you have done in developing or exacerbating the conflict. When using I statements, focus on your own feelings and actions rather than blaming others. In avoiding blame, you are increasing knowledge about the conflict, while at the same time not pointing fingers at the other party, but rather demonstrating that you had a part to play in making the conflict worse. This is really important because when you begin to tell the other party what your part was in making the conflict worse, they will become more open and they will begin to speak more about what their part also has been. And when people are open about their responsibility in the conflict, it makes it much easier for people's walls to come down and for them to be a little bit more vulnerable and work towards finding a solution. For example, instead of saying you always leave this room a mess, you can say, I feel upset when the room is a mess because it means I have to clean up before I can start to work. So this is talking about your own personal feelings and how the situation is affecting you. But notice that there's no blame here. This approach can help to de-escalate conflicts and promote more constructive communication. It can also be very helpful to apologize for any contribution that you have had towards the conflict or how you have impacted the other person. So when you begin with this kind of an apology and telling the other person that you are genuinely sorry for how you've contributed or how you've impacted them negatively, it will also make the other person much more willing and open to hear what you have to say. Here are some examples of I statements. I realize that my words may have come across as hurtful. I acknowledge that my actions may have been insensitive. I understand that my behavior may have caused a misunderstanding. I accept responsibility for not listening to your perspective. I recognize that my tone may have been dismissive. So there's not only an acknowledgement of your responsibility, but then you've also indicated how you might have negatively impacted the other person. I admit that I didn't communicate my needs clearly. I see how my behavior may have contributed to the tension between us. And here's an apology. I apologize for not being more considerate of your feelings. I understand that my attitude may have been confrontational. And the last example, I take responsibility for not being more patient during our conversation. Just in the chat box, if you don't mind, either indicate which of these statements seems to be very moving for you. Like if you heard one of these, which one of these would be really helpful for you to hear from the other person? Or have you recently heard or said an I statement that was impactful? That's great. Some people are putting numbers in the chat box. That's really good. Okay. Thank you very much for adding those comments. So, in addition to the I statements, it's really important that you take ownership of what you've done to negatively contribute to the conflict. And the second major point that I want to make is that when you're doing this open talking at the beginning, you want to focus, if you can, on your interests and not on your positions. This is a fairly important distinction for people in conflict resolution because sometimes people will come to the table, especially if they're in a negotiating kind of situation, and they will bring with them a position. And they won't understand that their position actually has interests that are embedded underneath it. And the position itself isn't the best way to come to the table. And if you're able to understand what your interests are that underlie your position, those are the things that are more important to bring to the table because they will help you find a suitable solution in your conflict. So a position refers to a specific solution or an outcome that someone wants to achieve in a negotiation or a conflict, while interests refer to the underlying needs, concerns, or motivations that drive that person's position. In other words, positions are the what someone wants, while interests are the why behind it. Understanding interests can help find alternative solutions that satisfy both parties' needs. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a difference between positions and interests. Let's say there are two coworkers, John and Sarah, and they're in conflict over the temperature in their shared office space. John prefers a cooler temperature, while Sarah prefers a warmer temperature. John's position might be that the thermostat should be set at 68 degrees Fahrenheit, while Sarah's position might be 75 degrees Fahrenheit. However, their interests may be different. John's interest could be that he wants to be comfortable while working and believes that a cooler temperature helps him focus better. Sarah's interest could be that she wants to avoid feeling cold and believes a warmer temperature helps her stay productive. But they haven't outlined this in their positions. By focusing on their interests, they may be able to find a solution that works for both of them, such as adjusting the temperature throughout the day or using a fan to circulate air. Understanding each other's interests can lead to a more collaborative and effective resolution to the conflict. So you want to make sure that you're focusing, if you can, on your interests, which underlie the positions that you might be tempted to bring out. Now, the third step, after you've openly talked about your background, is that you want to now start to look for options. You want learned, luxurious options. I just tried to find some wonderful adjectives that start with the letter L to go along with looking. Lavish your time here. This is where you get the leverage. Liberalize your relationship by suggesting an unexpected option. There are limitless possibilities. Now, when you're looking for options, some people might be more familiar simply with the phrase brainstorming. I have this picture here of what brainstorming could look like for some people, all of these different sticky notes. And brainstorming is wonderful. One of the things that brainstorming does is it sometimes will catalyze your thinking. So when two or more people are brainstorming together, the idea of one person might spark something in the other person, and it will create a new idea. And it's out of these new ideas that we will often find a solution that is more acceptable to the people who are in the conflict. And so in the brainstorming stage, it's really important that you bring out all of the possible options that you could. Sometimes in some conflict resolution templates, they will have a list of up to 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 different options that they expect people to come up with, because they want participants to realize you need to actually work hard at this part. It might seem like, oh, well, I'm not very creative, or I don't have very many ideas. And this is why listening to the other person can be very helpful, because as you hear some of their ideas, they will grow within you. They will catalyze and create something new. However, in the problem-solving phase, there is one very, very important rule. And that is, you do not comment on any suggestions at this time. This is a true brainstorming idea sessions, that ideas should be presented without criticism or judgment. This is critical when it comes to brainstorming, because if you start to evaluate some of the suggestions that are coming up, what that's going to do is it's going to shut down the idea of being creative and trying to come up with solutions, because people will then become defensive. They will be worried that maybe their idea now is not going to be acceptable. It's going to be judged. And so they want to keep quiet so that they aren't judged for any idea that they bring up. So in this brainstorming phase, you just say your ideas and nobody comments on them, nobody criticizes them, and nobody judges them. This is a very open time. So either you are saying an option or you're not saying anything at all. We don't respond with any criticism or judgment to the options that are being put on the table. Then we move into stage 4, and stage 4 is V for vote, and you vote for the best choice. So one by one, you will go through all the options, and together you will evaluate each option and its ability to meet your needs. You will eliminate options that you have identified are not as useful, and choose the one that provides the greatest opportunity to meet as many of the interests you identified when you were setting the stage. Secondly, it may also be useful to think about shrinking your non-negotiable circle. What's your non-negotiable circle? Well, in conflict resolution, especially when two people are involved, it's nice to think about the things that we will be flexible on and the things that we won't be flexible on as two circles, one of them being nested inside the other. So the outer larger circle are the things that you're willing to compromise on. If you're trying to set up a meeting, for example, you could say, well, I'm willing to compromise on the time that we'll meet. I could meet in the morning, I could meet in the afternoon, I could meet in the early evening. And maybe in your red not willing to compromise circle, you might say, I am not willing to meet past 10 o'clock at night. That's your not willing to compromise circle. However, when you're trying to resolve a conflict with somebody, you might want to look at what you have inside of your not willing to compromise circle and ask yourself, what am I willing to actually flex on and move from this circle into this circle? So for example, your not willing to compromise circle will become smaller, because that will open up the possibilities for a resolution or an alternative. And it will also demonstrate to the other person what you are willing to do in order to work with that person in this relationship. Of course, depending on the particular relationship that you're involved in and what the particular conflict is, that circle and whether or not it's going to decrease is going to change. If you're in a protracted conflict with somebody, it's possible you won't be willing to make that circle smaller at all, because you feel like that other person needs to be able to demonstrate something to you. But this is how people come into fixed positions. And so if you are willing to demonstrate that you can make this circle just a little bit smaller, it will signal something to the other party, and they will also then consider how much they'd be willing to shrink that circle as well. Also, when you are considering the best choice, note that your option may be a volte-face or a volte-face. This is a French terminology that comes and it means like an about face. Your option may require you to do a 180-degree turn on where you've been. And again, something that's really important in helping you make this decision is to weigh the concept of what exactly this relationship is. How important is this relationship to me? And that question of how important this relationship is to you is really going to determine your willingness to change in some of these circumstances. Stage 5, after you have implemented the choice that you vote for, you experiment with it, implement it, and then you endorse it if you approve of that particular option. After having decided together which is the best option to try out, decide how long you will test out this new option. When the time frame ends, ensure that this option is working the way that you had hoped. If not, you may consider returning to one of the other options from your brainstorming session. It might also be possible that if your option really isn't optimal, because you've tried something out, if you go back to the brainstorming stage, you might actually uncover new possibilities that make it easier to be able to resolve the problem. Okay. Before we go into an example role play, I'm wondering if anybody has any questions at all about any of the concepts that I have outlined here so far. You can feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like, or put your question in the chat box. Victor, go ahead.
Sir, is this from your book? Is this a book that you've already written, sir?
It's not. It's not a book that I've written.
Oh.
That's a great idea.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
No other questions? Okay. What I am hoping is that somebody that's on the webinar will volunteer to be a role player with me. Would anybody like to do that? Would you like to see what the role play is before you agree? Victor, you'll do a role play with me?
Oh, absolutely, sir. I'm committed to long life learning.
Okay, that's terrific. Okay, so the first role play that I've got outlined here is a Muddy Matters role play. In this scenario, the couple is experiencing a disagreement over how to spend their money. Now, they're listed in husband and wife, but it doesn't matter whether or not they're a straight or a gay couple, and it doesn't matter whether or not you're a couple at all. The husband wants to save for vacation while the wife wants to invest in a home renovation project. The focus of the role play is to brainstorm options for a possible solution. So, Victor, would you like to play the role of somebody who wants to save for a vacation or somebody who wants to invest in a home renovation project?
I want to go with the vacation.
Okay. So I'll be the one that's ready for a home renovation project. So the first thing that we need to do, Victor, is we need to decide when are we going to meet and talk about this? What works best for your schedule? And now we'll just pretend a little bit, but we'll make a schedule, okay?
How about Sunday?
Sunday? I'm busy in the morning, but I could do it in the afternoon or the evening.
When are you going to be available for our meeting?
What about 3 o'clock on Sunday afternoon?
Sure.
We can meet in the meeting room?
Yes.
Okay. And what we're specifically going to talk about, Victor, is about how we're spending our money, what we're saving for.
Okay.
Okay. Are you agreeable with that?
Sure.
Excellent. And because it's just you and me, your money and my money, I don't think anybody else needs to be there.
Sure.
Okay. Very happy to spend your money, Victor. Okay, so now Victor and I will meet on Sunday afternoon. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we have contributed to this problem before. We're going to do that openly. We're going to focus on using I statements, right? And we're going to apologize for things if we can think of that. We're not going to be blaming the other person, and we're going to speak from our own perspective, okay? So, Victor, I've been very steadfast in the fact that all I want to do is save all of our money for our home renovation project. And I sense that I've been so fixed in my position, I haven't really been flexible at all. So I apologize for my inflexibility.
Okay. I hear you. I feel that I really need a vacation because I've been so burnt out, this COVID thing and, being locked up in a room all day. So I really need a vacation. I feel I need a vacation.
Yeah, that I can understand that. Yeah. Um, I've also felt, Victor, like I've been really uh, tight with our money. I haven't really considered how we could use money in other ways, and maybe I need to be a little bit more open about how we spend our money.
Could we come up with I think we should come up with some suggestions of how we could brainstorm different possibilities.
That's a good idea. Let's start doing some brainstorming right now. Have you got
Okay.
some ideas, Victor?
Well, I think we could put away 10% of our paycheck every week.
Okay. That's a very interesting idea. Should we talk about, let's see, I guess I should really just focus on giving ideas rather than telling you what I think of your idea. We could have a board, and on the board, we could put down the goals that we have with our finances and what we're saving for.
Sounds good. I still feel that I really need some downtime, and I like to go to Japan. Maybe we can take some of that money that we're putting away and save the money and take a trip to Japan, because I really feel that we need to do that.
If we don't fix the things in the bathroom, then we're going to end up paying for bills that we can't afford. And with the age of the house, it's really challenging for me to think about how we're going to be able to fix things later on when they break.
But you could have did that 5 years ago, and you did that, and we had discussions about that before. I feel that you're not hearing me.
Okay, I'm going to step out of the role play for a minute here, just because I want to comment on Victor's point. And here, when we're doing brainstorming, we want to make sure that we're not evaluating or blaming. So although Victor's got a very valid point, if this happened a few years ago, this would not be an appropriate thing for this conversation. It will shut down the other person. It will make them feel like they are being judged and they are being blamed, and they won't want to continue to participate well in the discussion.
I've done that many times.
So when you're trying to resolve a conflict, blaming the other person is a very destructive thing to do in a conflict resolution process. And what you need to do is you need to try and find, can you repeat what you said, Victor? Do you remember what you said?
Vaguely. I was saying that we've had this issue before years ago, and we talked about it, and you didn't fix it then. So what's the point of doing it now?
Right. Okay. So what you can do in this particular instance is that you can rephrase what you said, and you can try and pull some information out of the other person. So what you're really wanting to do in a conflict resolution situation is try to understand the other person's perspective. This is a really key concept in conflict resolution. And your perspective is that before, in the past, you brought up this subject You wanted to address it at an earlier time, and the other person wasn't willing to do that. And so what you can do is you can reflect back, and then you can try and ask for understanding. So, for example, you could say in this particular instance, do you remember a few years ago when we had a similar problem? Can you help me understand what your perspective was back then about why you made the choice that you made for us not to have the renovations done? Because then what you're doing is, instead of blaming the other person, you're actually asking the person, give me more information so I can understand you better. And when you're doing that, you're actually asking the other person to open up. And because you're doing it without judgment and without blame, there's a much greater likelihood that that person is actually going to expose how they felt. And when they expose that to you, you might learn a new thing about what their perspective was back then, or an issue or an interest that was really important that drove them towards making that decision. You might also discover that they will say something like, I really didn't understand the problem was as crucial last time. And I wish that I had understood that. And that was probably my bad, right? So you might even get them to the point where they're going to confess their own weakness or their shortcoming in that particular instance 2 or 3 years ago, and you didn't even have to blame them, right? But there's a lot more openness, and when that openness and that transparency is there, that's really key and can be very helpful in trying to resolve this particular conflict. So as you search out some of these different options, it's really important that you work towards not blaming. You work on your I statements, and you encourage the brainstorming as much as possible without evaluating those options initially. So let's go back to try to brainstorm for a moment. Or do you think we're ready to move on to the option that we want to choose? Do you think we have enough options to choose from, Victor?
I'm not sure, sir. Yeah, you're saying about we should use I statements and we shouldn't blame the other person because that shuts them down. And then when you don't do that, it opens them up to even admit that there's a problem.
That's right. Yes. Okay. So if we were to agree on one of the options that we've suggested in our brainstorming, is there one that we came up with, Victor, that you thought would be useful?
Well, I kind of went back and forth because I said, let's put away 10%. And then I'm talking about going on a trip to Japan again. So
Right. So we're actually seeing two different perspectives there. One is where you actually have the position and the very thing that you want to spend the money on, and the other is the vehicle to be able to do it. So one is the method of saving 10%, but we don't really have established what we're going to do with that money that we've saved. And the other one is actually having a particular goal that we're working towards, but we don't know exactly how we're going to save towards that goal. So it would be good for us to work on both the method and maybe even an understanding of what the goal is, or for us to talk about, maybe another option for us, Victor, might be instead of 10%, we could save 15%, and we could save 5% of that towards a vacation and 10% towards renovations, or vice versa. And we would actually, and in that kind of a scenario, we would be working towards finding a solution that is collaborative and is working towards what you want and what I want. And this is where all of a sudden our red circle becomes smaller and our pink circle becomes bigger. And we're demonstrating to the other person that we're working with that we're actually trying to meet their interests as well as our own. Okay. Is everybody ready to try a role play together? Hope so. So here's another role play that I think is quite common. It's called the household chores role play. In this scenario, the couple is experiencing a disagreement over household chores. The wife wants her husband to pitch in more with the cleaning and cooking, while the husband thinks he's already doing enough. Focus of the role play is to brainstorm options for a possible solution. So I'm going to invite you to put your cameras on, and I will put you into breakout rooms. I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I think that you can see that well enough, or you've seen it enough. You don't need more explanation. And I'm going to put you into breakout rooms together.
Thank you, Victor, for a very good role play there. That was some good, thoughtful demonstration for us.
Thank you, Elaine. I just didn't want to go overboard and mess up what Dr. West was trying to do.
Okay. Christy, are you and David both still there together?
Yes, we are. Yep.
Are you willing to work as a pair in a role play?
Sure.
Otherwise, you'd have to be on two devices and you'd have to be working with somebody else. But that way you can be a pair, and then I'll make pairs with the other people in the meeting room as well. So I'm just going to take a minute to do this. And if you've got any reflections on the role play, you can put them in the chat box. That'd be great. Okay, here we go. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope that was a good experience. I'd love to debrief with you if you'd like to share a little bit about what that experience was like, what was helpful, what wasn't helpful, what you think could be useful going forward. What did you learn? Any insights? Parvani?
Yeah, my my partner was fantastic. So I was the wife and Elaine was the husband. And we talked, we used the I statement. And then we come up with the place and the time and what the subject is to talk about. And then we discussed, we brainstormed, correct? But Elaine was fantastic. I said, you know, I work 12 hours a day, and when I come home, I have to take care of the kids, clean up, cook. It's too much. Is there any way we can work together, come up with ideas? And her idea was, no problem. I work full time. I don't want to do anything. I'll just get a nanny, living nanny, and take care of everything. So I loved her. I said, that's fantastic.
Your husband also makes lots of money so that you can afford the nanny.
That's right. So then we discuss about, okay, not every family can come up with that solution. Not everybody has money. Now what? Then we were out of time, but I love her idea. There is no conflict between us.
Was there something in particular that you found was helpful in that discussion?
Is there anything was helpful, Elaine?
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting was I got very entrenched in my position. I was not going to help clean the house. She actually had some suggestions, and I was determined not to. At some point, I got to the point where I said, and I'm not sure what the conversation was that made this happen, but I got to the point where I said, I don't want to do that because I feel like a little kid. I'm an adult and I don't want to clean up the house because that makes me feel like a child again. And for myself, I felt like, oh, wow. Even in a role play, it made me dig deeper. Do you remember there was something about your position versus something else way back at the beginning? I can't remember.
Your position
that you said.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Your position versus your interests.
Yes. Yes. And without intending to get to that, I got there. So that was quite interesting to me.
That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Your experience in the role play?
Yeah, I found that the brainstorming, I was able to be more creative and think of ideas that I normally wouldn't have thought of, which we actually agreed on. So it was even more interesting to me that yeah, we had some good ideas come up and more creative.
What
And
helped
I think, go ahead.
what helped you to be more creative in the brainstorming?
I think coming up with like 10 different choices was like, whoa, and 15, like, ugh, how am I gonna come up with those? So it was like, then there was an opportunity to just like throw at anything, like brainstorming. So just throw it out and see what sticks. So yeah,
That's
good.
great. Thanks,
Yeah, thanks.
Pravani.
I think in most of the conflict is people when they have conflict, they try to point a finger at the other side and they blame other people, and because they're frustrated and they you did this, you did this, you did this, you know, you listen to me my way or highway. We never sit down and analyze and brainstorm that in the conflict usually both has a fault, both has done something that this conflict happened. The degree would be different, right? But we never want to admit what we did wrong, and that's the problem. So brainstorming is actually open your eyes to say, okay, how could we solve this problem?
Mhm.
There must be a solution.
That's why if you do a little bit of introspection before you come to that initial meeting together, then you might be able to discover what is it that I'm doing that's contributing towards this conflict. And when you can admit that and the other party can hear that, that's also one of those things that will open people up. And that will sometimes also generate a little bit more creativity because the other person is hearing, oh, you had a part to play in this too. That's very interesting that you accept responsibility for that or that you admit that.
But
Parvani?
but that doesn't work with all the conflict,
Mm.
because there are conflicts, like when you're dealing with narcissists, it's totally different.
That's when it sometimes is useful to get another person involved, a mediator who has experience in dealing with people who come with personality disorders or personality disorder-like traits, and helps to focus the discussion and can also shut things down if things are getting out of hand, and can also help them disengage if they need to disengage, because sometimes people will come with uh, a condition or baggage or history or something like that that actually makes it very difficult to make forward motion and forward progress. And sometimes a situation needs to be stopped so that people's health, people's mental health, people's safety is also considered.
Yes.
Any other comments?
I
Elaine?
think that was what Parvane did, was she talked about herself, but she never put blame, even though I was even describing myself as, I want to come home, I want to eat supper, I want to do this next, I want to do this. And I had a long list and I was not budging. She never blamed me. She just talked about herself. Then she actually liked I did have a solution. I just wanted to throw money at it. Then we didn't have money to buy a bigger house. So we had another problem. So there was a little bit of unreality in it, but I found myself shifting because I didn't have to feel any defenses.
Yeah. She had a good suggestion too. I said, pretend we don't have money. Okay. So I could go work part-time while the kids are at school, make some money. She said, no, sell your car.
Quite creative.
Yeah, I like to work with you, Elaine.
Okay. We are coming to the end here. I'm just looking for my handout. Oh, there it is. I want to share with you the handout that I'm going to send you. So for participating today, you get this little bonus. And I'm going to send you this reminder of what the different stages of conflict are. So number one, set the stage. Talk about the who, when, where, and what. Then at this meeting, openly talk about your background, what's been your responsibility. Focus on interests and not positions. Then look for options where you brainstorm without evaluation. Then vote for your best choice, find and implement the best option, and then experiment with your choice and endorse it if it's approved. Try out your option and then rate your option after using it. If you find that your option isn't good, then, like I said before, you might either need to go back to the brainstorming stage or just go back to number 4 and talk about another option and choose it instead. Okay? So I'll send you this handout as a reminder of these 5 steps to resolve your conflict. Each month, I am trying to do a different webinar related to conflict resolution. I always advertise them on Eventbrite. Usually it's the last Tuesday of the month. And because you had signed up for this one, you will get an email letting you know about the next one. But if you want to go and already sign up on Eventbrite, you can do that. And I will right now put in the chat box, as soon as I can copy it, the link that you can go to if you want to sign up for the next one. And the next one is entitled Workspace Conflict, Resolving Differences to Create Harmony at Work. Thank you very much for coming to join me tonight and to learn a little bit more about conflict and how to resolve it. If you have any questions, you can always reach me at my email address, which is wes@understandingtheother.com. Just put that in the chat box. And my website, of course, is just the suffix there, the domain understandingtheother.com. And there's a contact page on that website as well. I work as a certified mediator, helping people resolve conflict at all stages of conflict. And I also work with couples who find themselves stuck in the relationship and they're looking for a way forward. And they just want somebody to help them work out the conflict together and then find good habits for future good relationship. Thanks again for joining me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you again or interacting with you anywhere that you'd like. Have a nice
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good to meet you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dr. Wes.
You're welcome.
Nice meeting you, Josh. Nice conversation, buddy. Love you, brother.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, see you, doctor.
Bye, Victor.